Hey, welcome to the Runaways podcast. My name is Cody. Today we're going to be talking about KO. We're going to talk about what deck you should be bringing to the Battle Hardened Cincinnati, as well as the Azalea Problem. Is it solvable? Is it a problem? We'll find out. But today I am joined with Pat, Dan, and Lucas. We are back after all of the long holidays, ready to go. We are, 2 weeks away from basically everything going into overdrive for Flesh and Blood.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like the little bit of lull right before we get everything. And then it's just going to be a whirlwind of Pro Tour practice, figuring out new sets, figuring out new decks, and then just tournaments. So
Yeah.
this is like the last little break we get, and then it's all steams ahead. So how's
The
everyone
next one
doing?
is in August, pretty much.
The next break? Yeah. Everything's
Yeah,
piled at the
nonstop until
beginning of the
August.
year. Yeah.
hmm
So it's
I can't wait.
yeah.
Same.
I gave my girlfriend all of the dates. I said, "Here's all the
Yep.
dates I'm unavailable. The first half of the year is going to be pretty hectic, and then you get me for 3 months after that." So uh, you got to give everyone the warnings. Cool. Let's dive in quickly here because we do have a lot to cover. So let's talk about KO. Unfortunately, this came out a day after we did the podcast last time. But KO comes out. For people who don't know, KO is missing an arm, so he has a singular arm. So you only have one weapon zone, so you can't use two-handed weapons. Apparently, he's not strong enough to lift two-handed weapons. But his effect is attack actions you own get +1 attack while they are in any zone other than the combat chain. And the first time you discard a card with 6 or more during each of your action phases, create a might token. So, what do we think? What do we think of KO so far?
I can start this one off. I think
Mm.
KO with a Y is pretty sweet. I mean, the first thing that you notice is that you can only play one claw. Potentially, there's another new weapon in the set, but with a lot of the token numbers and things that people have been seeing, it's most likely just a claw. Um, the things that stand out to me first about KO are you get to play things like Berserk, Pulping, Wild Ride. Those get a lot better because you can play a billion blue sixes. Things like Smash Instinct, Barraging Bighorn, all of these 7/6/5s, they're now 6/7/8s. So your Wild Rides always hit, your Pulpings always hit. You can play a deck in theory with like 3 Berserk and 3 Blood Rush. The rest of your deck can be sixes, and you can still have, 18, 20 blues if you want them, or even more. Also, obviously, his hero gives you +1 damage a turn if you are discarding, which I think is kind of an underrated part of the hero ability that people are a little less keen on. The first, it's not one of the big flashy things. It's not one of the huge restrictions, but +1 damage a turn, as we saw with something like Ira, for example, can be incredibly powerful if you're playing, a 6-7 turn game. In addition to having a hero where your consistency is much increased. We've already seen in the past some aggressive Rhinar decks playing a lot of Pulpings and Wild Rides, abusing Mandible Claws, abusing Blood Rush Bellows, as well as a couple Berserk combo decks floating around. But now we kind of get this hero that naturally incorporates all of these things together and can do some really, really powerful stuff. You can play like 6 Pulpings and 6 Wild Rides and Blood Rushes and Berserks and just go ham. And Bare Fangs is always a 2 for 8 and makes a might a lot of the time. And you have all these really powerful synergies. And being able to play blues, it just adds so much, right? Because that was the past in the past, Brutes, specifically Rhinar, has had a little bit of a struggle with his resources because not only are the blue cards so weak, playing things like blue pack hunt and garbage like that, but they are also not 6 power, so they decrease your consistency. But now you can have a Brute deck with 20 blue sixes, and so your cost curve of 2 cost go again card into Mandible Claw into powerful 2 cost attack like Swing Big or Bare Fangs really starts to get impressive, especially if you're making a might token every turn, right? You can be looking at, like 3 card 15s every turn consistently in a class that also has these powerful explosive turns with things like Berserk and Blood Rush Bellow. Um, and yeah, he's just a really cool hero, really interesting. Looks like the aggressive Brute in the set. Rhino will probably be more defensive and value oriented with some powerful intimidates, but KO just raw and smash face and such.
So yeah, I mean, I'll say that his ability is very interesting. The first thing that obviously stands out is the loss of a weapon slot. As a fatigue player, that makes me very worried about the end of the hero going any sort of long game, because you gain access to all these blues, like blue, reincarnate is one that I think is going to be a big deal. Like that one is a very nice one to discard at random and then stick to the bottom. But like, if you don't have a good weapon, like your chances of going long are kind of tough. So I don't know if his ability generates enough value to, fight a hero that is trying to fatigue you. But the +1 damage a turn that you're getting is also offset by the fact that you're negging yourself a card. So I don't know. I'm positive, trying to be positive about the hero, but to me, I'm worried that he's going to flail a little bit. Berserk is a very cool thing. I think that that one I would love to see that one work if you could build some sort of OTK style deck and we'd have a new hero that can kind of one turn kill somebody. And maybe this hero can do it better. But again, one of the things that you usually had on those turns were, like Blood Rush and Claws and things like that. So I don't know. I would love to see a new weapon. Hopefully there's a weapon that is a one-handed weapon that makes it a little bit, better at going long. That's what I'm hoping to see for this hero. So
Dan?
I'm just happy to see my boy KO make it to CC.
Yes.
I've been a very avid KO enjoyer since Crew Unlimited. I remember we did like a team sealed event for that where you got like crew plus the first two sets. And I slammed KO and I like OTK'd everyone. And it was so much fun. But yeah, I'm super happy to see him be a CC hero. I'm even more happy that he has a new ability because the old ability has no place in CC. Sorry, KO. Yeah, no, he seems cool. Like we have by far the most consistent brute if you want to build it that way. And brute's kind of been inherently very inconsistent in the past. So I think if he is strong, he might be problematic. And I kind of hope that's the case because I want to play KO. I think the weapon's fine though. Like it's just Emberblade at home, no?
Yeah.
It's 3 go again for 2. You just gotta work for it.
It's not always go again like Fi's go again. Like Fi's go again is much more easy to turn.
I think you could build it to be though against fatigue.
Yeah, I think
maybe.
I think we have to see how many cards in this set discard and get go again. Like the beat chest mechanic.
Yeah.
That one's interesting. Like any cards that like
presumably there will be a beat chest go again card.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already have.
Yeah, the new 2 cost 6 go again.
Yeah. Just discard a card.
Seems super good.
In addition to potentially like 6 wild rides and some number of pulpings.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm always afraid of pulping in those type of decks, just getting stuffed and just losing your turn. But
I don't like that one as much. But
yeah, but wild ride is, I mean, it has the same problem as some of the other cards, but so another interesting thing is that you get to play ready to roll, so you can make your scab skins better as well, and you can Rolling Thunder. I know Yuanji is a big fan of that card, Rolling Thunder. So maybe we can combo those together and make some.
Yeah, you can also
2-card sixes.
You can also play Tear Limb from Limb as like a kind of like pulping Wild Ride 7 through 9, like at red. That card basically is just like 2 for 6 with go again, but it's a blue and it doesn't have the pulping downside of being bad. Obviously, it's another card in your deck that's not a 6 power, so if you're looking for something like Berserk, it makes it a lot worse. It's also another card that doesn't block, which if you're a brute player that's happy that you have more 6s, I hope you don't mind cards not blocking, because, oh boy, this deck does not look like it wants to block.
Yeah, that might be okay if its numbers are good enough. It might just be a Berserk deck at heart. What I really like about it is I think this hero design is very smart. I really like that they are fixing some of the brute issues with not having enough like blue 6s, for example, without actually making any more blue 6s. Yep. They just are like, here, this hero is more consistent by giving things +1. You can also play like non-brute cards now, and they're also 6s.
Bingo.
But you didn't just print like a rabble that has 6 power now, right? Like that's brute card. You just made it so that you can now play rabble in your deck. I really think this is very intelligent design by the creators on how they design KO. That's what I really like about it. Whether it's good or not, it really should be. Like it seems like it should be playable. In any, is it top tier? We have to see more cards, in my opinion.
We also talked. We didn't really discuss this, but one thing a lot of people online have been talking about, especially, is you get to play. There's like 3 main cards, but there's like a lot of options. Kind of like how you noted, you get to play some generics, but you can play Zealous Belting, and Enlightened Strike, and they don't decrease your consistency. And you can play Rouse the Ancients, and that card is a lot easier to cast than in the past. In the past, you would need a red 7 power card, which honestly those are not very good, in addition to a resource card. And now that's just any red and any blue in your deck reveals to Rouse. So you can have some really easy Rouse the Ancients plays, and that card is pretty silly. So,
but then you're heading another 6, mist in your deck.
You are.
I mean, you could build it maybe differently, but I don't know. I do like the Zealous Belting one. That one seems really easy because pitch a blue 5, play a red 5, and they're both good for your deck or everything else.
Yeah, you can go like pitch a blues.
If he's going to have trouble going wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that deck is made in the deck building process, in my opinion. That will be a deck building puzzle, and then figuring out exactly what tools you need in order to win games. Do you need to pitch stack a Berserk combo in order to win some of your matches? Maybe. Reinar used to pitch stack his combo. He'd just like block and swing his weapon and do generic stuff, like a 3 for 7s. And then he would finally hit his big turn and go off. So there is a world where it's pitch stacking a Berserk is one of the win conditions for KO.
Yeah. Or you could get cute and just not pitch stack the Berserk.
No, we're bringing pitch stacking back.
Second cycle's back.
Anything else on KO before we move on to our next topic?
I just think for ready to roll, I want to see like 2 consistent dice roll actions per turn before I'm considering that card.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as we get 2, that card's actually like kind of insane.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
You can give it to us. Arg Smash, your favorite card.
Okay, so next let's talk about, we have Battle Hardened Cincinnati coming up. It's this weekend, right? Sweet. And I know we have a handful of people going from the team. Lucas, you'll be there, right?
Yep. It's a Battle Hardened.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about what deck you're supposed to be playing at the Battle Hardened this weekend. In your opinion, what would you bring? What do you think people should bring to the Battle Hardened this weekend? Lucas, if you just want to tell everyone what you're bringing, that'd be great as well.
Yeah.
But feel free to go.
Yeah, I'm playing Bravo at Cincinnati. I think there are actually a lot of really good choices for this event. I'm getting some disapproving looks from my teammates. I think Bravo's a good choice. I think Levia's a pretty strong choice. I think Azalea is a good choice. I think Dash, Dromai. Really, it's the same meta we had at the 20K, but nothing is kind of stood out, right? Historically in Flesh and Blood, we'd have had some open metas and then they get smaller as, more tournaments go on and more things do well, but nothing interesting has happened. Every top 8's like 6 to 8 different heroes. I think you can kind of just play whatever you enjoy and whatever suits your play style. I think most decks are basically just fine into everything and then trying to dodge like 1 or 2 matchups and preying on 1 or 2 matchups. I'm playing Bravo because I really enjoy playing Guardian and because I think it's really solid. And I think that the way that some people will be attacking the meta will be assuming that they're good into Bravo and will ultimately not be good into Bravo. And also because I know that Brody is probably going to play Azalea. And I just don't want to lose to Brody. I mean, that's really it. I haven't lost to him in a tournament match yet, and I'm scared. So I don't want to do it now.
Okay, are you not concerned he'll pivot?
If he pivots,
he surely has other decks he's ready to play if he hears this.
Well, this will be released after the.
No, we can release it.
No, this will be released tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's not going to do anything.
So Lucas is not winning the Battle Hardened, so that's fine. Unfortunately,
nobody can win with Bravo.
I won the last 2 Battle Hardens I played in. I'm winning the 3rd in a row.
Yeah, but you didn't play Bravo.
I didn't play Bravo.
So,
you played
no, I did. I played
yeah,
Bravo. I played Bravo. I literally won a Battle Harden.
Did you?
Bravo. Yeah, Bravo.
Yeah,
started
but not the
match.
last two. The last two,
Part of the show. That doesn't count. That doesn't count.
So, okay, maybe someone else on the team can pick up that win.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the decks you should be thinking about are probably the two ninjas. I think both are good choices. I don't really know how to break down the difference too well. Katsu makes the game harder for your opponent and harder to play, and I think Fi makes the game harder to like have control over the game and win because you draw the nuts, they just kind of get rolled over. I think both look really good. I agree with Dash being super strong. Personally, I would be playing Dash. I really enjoy the mech playstyle and a lot of things that that deck has to offer. And I think Dromai is kind of the obvious, probably the best deck, even though I doubt it will win this event. But like most powerful. And then I think Azalea, I think I mentioned an episode or two ago, like if you are lacking in prep time, just slam the Azalea. You draw well, you're just going to kill everybody nice and easy.
Why don't you think Bravo's a good choice right now?
I just don't think the deck is very strong compared to the decks I listed. I think historically it doesn't really win events ever.
Yeah.
That said, it is fairly consistent, and I think for something like Battle Hardened, just like throwing big number, blocking efficient,
Yeah,
can
I
get
will
the job
say,
done.
I think recently
I'm
the
also
deck has
just a Bravo hater.
Yeah, I think recently the deck has improved a lot, and we haven't been able to like see it like come into its own because even when strong players have been playing it, they've either won tournaments off stream or they've done really well in CC and less good in limited, like we saw at Worlds. But I think some of the recent lists and kind of like the list I'm playing have kind of come into its own. I think the deck is really strong with some chess piece modifications.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's just kind of obvious what it does. It doesn't ask your opponent any real questions. It can get ran over. It can draw poorly. Its power level is always known. It only has the pummel play style, which is how it
Wait, you
accrues real value. It should lose against most good Dromais. It should lose against Dash. It then can just flip coins with a lot of other decks if they just get too much power into you too quickly, like Vi and the other ninjas. It's just not a deck. I mean, it loses the Levy as well, which should be a real deck. It 100% just loses the Kano almost every single time.
Good Kanos.
maybe
Good
other
Kanos.
people
It's
maybe
just
other
like-
people lose
you're
to
just like-
Kanos and Levias and Dashes and Dromais, but I'm not gonna.
You're playing.
You just-
You're playing the Levia matchup though, and it's like their games can be so different. Like every game is like so different when Levia versus Bravo. Like that's one of the things that like when I've been playing Levia and
True.
If I end up going this weekend, I'm very unlikely to go, but I want to go. But if I end up making it, I will be playing Levia. The Levia Bravo matchup, like every game is so different. You'll just like have this like game where it's like, okay, you came out firing early, and then you put them on the back end so fast, and we're gonna now it's a redeem game, or like they'll come off really strong in the early game, and then you're just like, well, it's gonna be a short one, and I'm gonna go for consumed, and like do I have to try to set up pitch stack to do this super late game dominate Shade and Death Hydra like to win, or like I think the matchup is like you might think it's good, but like Levia has ways to win every facet of that game. It's just whether or not it gives you the ability to win the matchup.
I think the reason I feel so good.
I was gonna say also the way that people are building Bravo currently can lose to Azalea, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But with the current cards they're putting in the deck, that matchup's also not free anymore unless you're willing to run enough D-reacts to make it a real matchup. And even when you're doing that, because they have the new arm piece, or they have their arm piece back from being banned, they have a lot of play patterns that can still sneak in a lot of damage. So it's not as free as that matchup used to be. I just think with Bravo, you know 100% what you're doing. You have very few real decisions to make when you're ever playing the deck. And because of that, it's a lot harder to find wins. You're just going to play your thing and hope that it works.
That's
why I don't like it. The deck's strong. Like, it's strong enough, but it's just like...
And you're
I think-
probably good enough that you can go X and 2 and miss the cut. So I mean,
I think
No, I trust that he will top 8 with Bravo.
yeah, I think actually I would agree with most of the things you guys are saying. I think there are some things that I'm going to be doing differently than other people that will help me have a little more agency. Like the Lavaya Bravo matchup, kind of like Pat said, that there's so many like different games that can be played. I've been playing that matchup kind of just like nonstop for the past week against a few different people. I feel pretty good on both sides, actually. I think, I mean, skill matchup's kind of a weird term to put it, but I feel like there's a lot of experience-based misplays that either player can make, and I feel like I'm not going to make any of them. And no matter who my opponent is, they'll probably make some of them. I feel really good about picking my spots and understanding how to pivot and how to stay on the front foot and pivot off the back foot and things like that. I think there's a lot of interesting play in that matchup, especially from the Bravo side, that goes beyond what most people will do in the matchup, where there are no heuristics. I think in the matchup is the big thing. There's no like rules that the Bravo can follow every game and have the same win percentage. Like whether to block 3 or swing hammer is a big deal, or whether to block 2 or swing hammer, or am I dominating crippling this turn? Am I tunicking to crippling this turn? Am I making them have it with flesh bag? Things like that. There's a lot of like small decisions that are, you can't just say, yeah, you never dominate crippling, or you never play Starstruck, or you always play Starstruck. You always block out as much as you can, or all these things that I think from what I've seen from most Bravos that play the matchup, they stick to their heuristics, even if there aren't any that work every time. And then into Azalea, I won't give away too much, but I really like that matchup. I think it's a lot of fun. I get to go raw. Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, to be fair, you're not going to play any Levias. Like that's just an us thing for
I mean,
right now.
I don't know. Ethan's not going, and I'm probably not going. So.
Yeah, then I feel great.
There's been like no real adoption of that deck, so I mean that's not a real sticking point on why you should or shouldn't play the deck, in my opinion.
I do think that it is probably one of the best decks in the current meta. Like it's very good into like Dromai. It's very good into like pretty good into Azalea. I mean, you can lose that matchup, but Husk is so huge in that matchup, and so is Fleshbag. And the new version of the build is just like quite strong. Like you're bad against some of the ninjas, maybe, but like you can still win those games. It's not impossible. I don't know. I really think that after Ethan like kind of did so well with it at the 20K, I thought that maybe people might start taking it more seriously, and you might see some stronger players picking it up. But I think only time will tell. But I do think that
the deck's too hard to play.
Yeah, it's just so hard to get
very
the
hard to
learning
play.
curve.
I will,
and it's so unpleasant and painful. Like
yeah.
Yeah.
And then
You just,
sometimes
like,
you
have
play
wins and you see
perfect,
them
and
go
the deck
away.
just loses the game
Yeah.
for you.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Scabskins is
I
like
think you guys will be surprised.
a very annoying card to
I
have to
think
deal
you'll-
with as well. But like the card is just like I don't know. I will just roll it every time and just accept the one whenever it comes.
We
But
know, Pat. We know you like rolling.
No, I'm just saying like in general. Like yes, I mean I memed it a lot like earlier, but like I have played the deck a lot more since the last time I've talked about Scabskins, and like yeah, it does ebb and flow. Like you do eventually even out, and like, but I can only imagine Ethan's feeling of the card because he's been playing it for God knows how long, much longer than everybody else.
We don't need to
But
imagine.
He
hates it.
It's so it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding to like figure out these like hard spots that you're in, and like win a game that you like probably shouldn't have won, and then you're like, oh, I stole that one. I don't know. I really enjoy the hero. So.
No, I think the hero's very good. I think it's way harder to play than people think it is, and it's also very hard to navigate the deck in a way so the deck doesn't beat you. And that's like half the gameplay, and it takes a lot of time and experience in doing.
Yeah.
However, with that said, I think you should be playing Dash this weekend.
Dash, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you should be playing Dash this weekend. I think it's time. I think it's very good. I think it's very balanced, and it has multiple decisions. No one knows what version you're playing when you sit down to play it as well.
That's the best part, yeah.
And then you have game plans for everything that are vastly different, and then it has pretty one-sided matchups or pretty close matchups. There's probably the worst ones like Azalea is probably the worst matchup for Dash. Pretty
Yeah,
close.
Azalea's garbage.
Brute.
That's
Brute can be pretty hard as well,
yeah.
but I think that deck is very good. Very, middle of the road, but it does broken things.
Yeah.
Does the format change at all after the Kano victory in Florida?
No,
Will the
everyone
people
forgot.
adapt? Everybody already forgot.
I,
Okay,
Everyone
I,
already
I
forgot.
already
I,
forgot
That
about
happened?
it.
I'm really
Kano
hoping to see like the resurgence of just like everybody just like, all right, put some AB back in our deck. We're aware of the problem. We're willing to donate the sideboard slots now to it, and
Just
I
put
don't know.
put two Oasises in and put an extra piece of Null Rune, and it'd be like, okay.
Mm-hmm. But that's what I mean.
Only
Like,
silly people
are
do
you willing
exactly
to
that.
make that sacrifice to your sideboard to include those cards in your deck?
Yeah, why would
I
you
think
put
I would.
exactly
If I was
two
go-
if I was going to
Oasis
the Battle
and
Hardened, I
Null Rune
would.
in your deck?
Yeah, I would play. I'd play. But I would also. I think playing Katsu is also pretty good as well. And then you should, or do you just play Azalea? Like those are the three decks that, in my opinion, you should be playing.
I think I think if I
If
wasn't
I was
playing
going,
Levi,
I'd bring
play Levi.
Azalea.
Yeah, if I wasn't playing Levi, I'd be playing Azalea, and if I wasn't playing one of those three decks, I just wouldn't come.
And you
I
just
hate
hope
that
to never see an Azalea mirror because that thing is garbage.
Yeah, the
I
Azalea
love
mirror
the
does
Azalea
not
mirror. I'm
seem
so
very
lucky.
enjoyable. Like you already take this
Dude,
hero that's like so inconsistent, and then you're like take the mirror match on top of that.
So,
Dude, I love
speaking
the
of
Azalea
Azalea,
mirror.
let's
I'm
talk
better.
about. Let's talk about
Good transition, Cody.
the main topic for today, which is the Azalea problem. And I want to give kind of an idea what I'm referring to here, and then hear your guys' idea on this. So, thinking of the fact that the way Azalea is being played and meant to be played, apparently, is as a on-hit, lockdown, all-in type hero. Where its ability is it's going to have massive amounts of on-hits to gain additional value. It is going to try and do that through using dominate attacks. And while doing this, it's going to limit what your opponent's actual actions are that they can play on a turn-by-turn basis. Its weakness is supposed to be that it is inconsistent, that it can be stopped with D-reacts, or that the deck itself cannot block properly. So, with these ideas, do you think that currently Azalea is a problem for the game? Do you think the design is overtuned, or do you think it's fair and decks people just aren't respecting the deck enough?
Um,
Who wants to go
I
first?
don't. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think Azalea is not a problem for a couple reasons. First of all, I think the deck is actually pretty challenging to play. I think a lot of games obviously play themselves where it's, wow, I have 3 pumps and an arrow, and then they died. But a lot of the multiple arrow or multiple pump hands, there's a lot of interesting play with Snapdragons and Bullseyes and Rain and Knock. I think that there's a lot more to the deck than meets the eye. I really enjoy playing Azalea for that reason. We see certain players like Levi and Brody do much better than. I mean, really, you see, there's only a few people that consistently do well with the deck, and typically that's a sign that the deck is difficult, or at least requires a lot of experience to be able to play properly, which I think makes a deck less of a problem inherently. If a lot of people aren't playing it, and the few people that are playing it have been playing it for a while, and that's why they're doing well, I think that's fine. I also think that the deck is more consistent than people realize. The dominate effect off the top is a bit of a high roll sometimes, and how many codexes and knocks you draw into aggressive decks can be a bit of a high roll, but I think it's less inconsistent and more just has the ability to have these really swingy games. The D-react problem, also where she's weak to D-reacts, I don't think is like a huge thing against her, with the exception of fatigue decks that have a lot of D-reacts. Then that becomes a problem. I think the big thing that I would say about Azalea that I don't like is her ability to just roll some games without requiring the loss of consistency. She is a little inconsistent at times. You can, not draw arrows, But if you play enough games, you find that typically the deck plays almost every, if not every turn. But the games against like ninjas or dash, where nothing interesting happens and it's just pump, 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 red, pump, 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 remorseless, pump, knock, red, you can't block 8, you die. Like that kind of stuff can be really unfortunate for the game. Because any game where one player's playing and the other isn't is obviously a bit of a problem. We've seen that in the past with things like Starvo, just not letting your opponent play at all is pretty boring. Um, but I think, especially with the current meta, with decks like Dromai and Bravo, creating a lot more interesting games where Azalea can really like flex her, for lack of a better way of saying it, just cool muscles, where she has a lot of really interesting play with Death Dealer and Codex, and you can play these cool tech cards like Memorial Ground or Fate Foreseen is like a really interesting card in that deck, I think. And so I don't think that she's too boring or too uninteractive for the game, but I could see in the future if more decks like ninjas and dash become prevalent, where she just kind of is the only thing that you can do to beat those decks, and that can be pretty uninteresting because those games are boring as all hell.
So I just want to reiterate then. So consistency isn't as big of a deal as people think it is. The deck is consistent enough. That's what you're saying. You're saying that random D reacts in decks that aren't like Bravo or maybe Dromai aren't really too hard for the deck to overcome.
Yeah.
And it still has play into Bravo and Dromai. And then for
play.
the aggro decks like Dash and Katsu and Phi, it's able to flex all of its muscles into that deck and do what it's supposed to do, which is not allow them to play. So I'll reiterate: is this deck a problem if it doesn't have weaknesses and is immensely strong in the current meta?
Well, I think the blocking thing is a real weakness. Like the way you beat this deck is you're a deck that can time walk one Azalea turn with your Carrion Husk, and in the meantime, you've gotten their health total to a range where they are blocking with cards.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the truest weakness the deck has. If consistency isn't an issue, then yeah, the deck probably is a problem. And I think if 50% of the field played this deck, it wouldn't be very fun.
So is the reason it's not a problem because it's lower played?
I mean,
Lucas,
that
kind
should
of
never
sounded
be
like
the answer, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it depends.
I mean,
like,
yeah, it's low play is fine.
I'm just saying, how do you
Yeah.
beat the deck as Dash, Katsu, or Phi? Like, how do you beat the deck?
That's
as any of
that's
these?
the
lucky.
problem.
You
Is
hope you
if your definition of a
skip your
problem
turn.
is like
That being the answer is
Yeah.
is the issue, right? Yeah.
like even Warmongers
yeah,
doesn't
she
do
just
it.
has really good matchups.
I mean, Warmongers
Yeah.
can do it. It just she has answers to Warmongers too. Like you, I I remember playing. I played 2 Warmongers in our Dromai deck specifically because we wanted to have better matchup into Azalea, and then you just and they just go E strike arrow, and you just like wasted your whole turn. Like it's just like I'll say that the deck certainly has some negative play experiences on the other side of it. Like you certainly can, if you're playing a deck like Phi or Katsu or somebody that wants to go multiple chains links long to make any value for their turn, like those decks might have a bad time. Like especially if you're a newer player, and you just see red in the ledger and you're just like, oh, okay, I just don't get to play and I'm not having fun and I'm going to stop playing the game. Like I think that it's not as bad as like Starvo was bad, like where you're discarding cards and you're not even actually getting a turn at all, basically, because you had to, block or discard your hand. But it's a little bit of a different angle on that aspect. But the thing that I will say is that she's at a point where right now, like you can get under her, like at some point, like the one action per turn, like certain decks like Bravo and Levia can just okay, well, if this turn I'm gonna get hit, I can at least send one big attack at you that you're never gonna block. You're always just gonna take the damage, and you're taking raw damage to the face because Azalea never blocks. So you the game becomes like a way where you even when you do get hit, you still have to just put a little bit back into her, just like a little bit, and then on the turns when she doesn't dominate you, which because of the inconsistency issues she has, you can just block, like make her have it on the turns that she needs to have it, and then on the turns when she does have it, do as much back as you can, and it has the ability to do it. And people with good armor like and D reacts can like at least play. So I don't know. D reacts should be good against her. So in theory.
And I do think
Oh,
this
they're
is why we
good.
got Warmongers, because those decks don't need help and they don't really play Warmongers all that well. Where like the ninjas is like your only hope. Like maybe this one card will win this time, which isn't fun either. Like nobody wants that.
I mean, yeah, like Warmongers
I
is
think if
like
the whole
like the
meta was
perfect
to
answer
just
for Greninja, because it's a card that you're ecstatic to put in your deck because it's a blue 0 that turns on your Kodachis, and you know
I'm not ecstatic at all. I don't want to
it's
play
time
that
walk,
card in my
sometimes
deck.
it's time walk. You would not play that card in your Ninja deck?
I don't want to. I feel like I have to for some matchups.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just have a 0 for 2 attack still and not play a card that sometimes says do nothing.
It still pitches to do your other turns though. Like I don't know, like that's the game we're playing. That's the flesh and blood that you've agreed to play. Like sometimes cards in your deck are mostly going to be pitched, but like some scenarios that they get cast. Like so, like this is what you've signed up for if you're playing a game like this. So, like where you
I don't
put
think you've
cards in
played
your
enough
deck.
Ninja.
I mean, I guess that's fair.
You just
but
play all the cards every turn.
I don't know. Sometimes you got to pitch cards.
So my thing is,
there's an opportunity
I think-
cost to the card, but it's really powerful.
I think Warmongers is a little overblown on how good it is, due to the fact that the deck currently runs Rabble, E-Strike, and can load an arrow. These arrows have relevant on hits. So without even pumping, you are able to Rabble. You can then swing an arrow. You can still have a 2-turn hand. Even just throwing an arrow for 5 that has a relevant on hit, whether it's +2 damage, whether it's you don't have an action, whether it's you have to pay life now for every action you take, whatever the actual on hit effect is, this is still then asking you to block again or give them 5 free points of damage. I think the actual power behind Azalea has nothing to do with Dominate. Dominate is how it attempts to win fatigue matches. I think the power in Azalea comes from its ability to play things like Rabble, which are unblockable, most of the time 0 for 4 go again attacks. You cannot spend ever any cards on blocking a Rabble that does free damage. Then their ability to play Bolton shots without having to have used their weapon yet, their bow, means that you basically can't block the Bolton shot, so they get a bunch of free damage that way. Then the secondary is because you have to save it for the arrow. Against aggro decks, they have essentially 6 arrows that say you can't play the game. Those are Red in the Ledger, along with the Remorseless. Both of these arrows are too high value into the aggro decks to be played, and Azalea's ability to play off of a 2 or 3 card hand, assuming it has a arsenal, is much better than a lot of people think it is. Especially if it has like an arrow set, It can use boots. It just needs to be able to escape from these bad turns a couple of times. It now has its gloves back. So even when you get it to block, get the deck to block, it doesn't mean that its turn isn't threatening enough, and the arrows have relevant on hits already, which ask for cards for minimal amount of their cards that they're sitting at you. I think this causes some problems with Azalea, and the fact that Azalea can beat Dromai pretty consistently. Like, it's not a good matchup by any means for Azalea. Like, that matchup can just go either direction pretty quickly. And depending on who you talk to will say, like, which one's favored. But it can win that. It can play that matchup. That's like a real matchup it can just play. And then the Bravo is playable. I think a properly built Bravo deck, it shouldn't win. But most of these Bravo decks aren't running big D-reacts anymore because they're trying to hedge for other matchups, which means that fatigue isn't a real option. There. However, them throwing a big attack at you is still pretty strong. I will say, I think Azalea is significantly overtuned. I don't know any other decks that can push 11 plus damage in a round with 3 on hits. I think that's kind of ridiculous, in my opinion, because every single pump is not 3. So it's paying a card, instead of the pump just being 3, the pump is like 5 or 6, depending on what the actual on hit effect is. And it has a momentum that gaps people. If they come in with 12 damage, 13 damage, 11 damage, and you have to give them your whole hand, you're just giving them an entire another turn to find a dominate or find a way for you not to be able to interact with them, which is more dangerous than it is against other decks that maybe that was their big turn and you're like, oh, this is their big turn. This is Art of War turn or whatever it is. Let me give you my whole grip so that, next turn I can play the game. Well, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And then on top of that, they have Codex, which becomes a problem. I liked how this turned out because I'm very much in the camp that I think Azalea is a real problem for the game. I think any aggro deck has no agency or any ability to play the game. It can't even sideboard properly to make the matchup playable. You're still at the mercy of whatever they draw and whatever arrows they throw at you. You're just sitting there waiting and hoping you get out of the box eventually so that you can like punch them. Now, if you get out of the box and punch them, you can probably win the game. Like that's always been the case for Azalea, but you have no agency or control or decisions that get you out of that, and a lot of decisions that punish you even harder, especially if you're running 2 blocks. Like it's just nothing you can do there. And then its worst matchups, it has playability. I think this push of Azalea from a deck that was a joke to a deck that has the best on hits in the game, the best pumps in the game, the most draw in the game, along with the best card in the game, which is Codex, is causing some problems. And I think that the only reason it's not being spoken about more is because not enough people are playing the deck. I think if you go to locals and more often, and most locals have experienced a 1 or 2 Azalea problem, where they have to deal with Azalea every week, and it's a bit of an unfun experience, especially for newer players. But then if we were going to actual massive tournaments that had 10-15% Azalea show up, there isn't a way to build a deck to play against it. You cannot make your aggro deck beat the deck. You just can't play those decks at tournaments anymore.
That's why I stopped playing 5.
Doesn't make it much better.
That was like a big reason.
And its hard combo, supposedly hard counters are no longer hard counters because it got its glove back. I think this deck is just underrepresented, and that's why people are not thinking it's a problem.
Yeah. I think
Why are we not playing at the Battle Hardened then?
You should be.
I'm not.
But you said you're playing Dash.
No, I said I was playing Azalea, but I think people should play Dash. I think Dash is good.
Why should people play Dash if you're playing Azalea?
Because not everyone's just going to play Azalea.
Apparently, it's too hard to play.
But you should play Azalea.
Okay.
And then you should grind out the draw matchup so you know how to play that matchup because the matchup's hard.
Yeah.
Sure.
After heavy hitters, I take a look at it. I think that there's some potential for heavy hitters to make Azalea worse with new Bravo and also mid-rangey warriors that have a lot of armor and force you to block can, if built in a way to beat Azalea, can be a problem. Like if you have, because they also have things like Steel Blade Shunt. If you have like shunts and more D-reacts and, roughly 87 block on your armor, and you have, these really powerful 2-card hands, as well as hands that can punish Azalea for whiffing and having like 5-card hands. I think we could see her get worse after this set. But I agree. I think if she stays as good as she is and more people play her post heavy hitters, then we could see a problem because there is a lot of...
I realize Cody feels really strongly about this, and I know that I've talked to Cody at events and just been very frustrated every time he plays against Azalea, and I realize that it's not all anecdotal. You're making great points, and it's she should not be the best deck, but when you look at what she was and she was just terrible garbage, and people were like, well, Azalea needs help, and this is what their attempt was. So LSS was hearing from everybody, oh, we want Azalea to be good, and you got what you wish for. It's what are they supposed to do?
Careful.
Maybe just not print Codex. I don't know.
Yeah, Codex.
Maybe take that away.
Codex of Frailty was I don't know, and it's a card that has been
it's not even the best Codex.
We all call for it to be. It is.
Get out of here.
Codex. Don't.
No.
You don't. But we had people, complaining about that card in Bolt and Shot together, in Lexi, and it was the same type of deal. But Lexi was a whole different monster. But you could actually, play against Lexi, because Lexi wasn't dominating her attacks, So and she didn't have Time Walk Arrow, so. But
my other issue is just that you can't set up to buy a turn. because they have on hits that just wipe your arsenal. So if you're like, hey, I'm gonna take damage this round, and then I'm gonna keep a D-react for my next time, and I'm gonna keep a blue to pay for my blood rot pox, and I'll just block because you dominated. Boom, it's fine. But half the time they're hitting you with something that's just like, and you don't get an arsenal. So like you can't even make a plan for later in the game to buy yourself a turn. It's my issue is not with like its overall power level. I think its power level is actually fine. My issue with it is there's no way to actually counterplay the deck as an aggro deck. Zero. You cannot build your deck in a way to play the game. It's
We also
completely
haven't
dependent on Azalea to allow you to play the game because they missed.
we also haven't mentioned the new card yet that like counters the current counter strategy, which is blocking well and throwing a big attack. Like now you only get one card, so have fun swinging your weapon.
Yeah, but
Judge,
you get one
Judge
copy of
Jury,
that
we'll
card,
see.
and it has to have an aim counter, and like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
That card's
that card to
good,
me
but-
is like barbed undertow number 4, like most of the time, in my opinion.
I think it's
I
I think
don't
it's
think that's
barbed.
true.
I think it's barbed
that's
That card
the
is
one.
and
terrifying.
then barbed undertow is 2 through 4.
You will certainly play it in your deck. You certainly will play it in your deck because you can get it with Knock the Death Whistle, and like it will be good.
Probably.
Like, it'll certainly be warranting a slot in your deck, but like a lot of the times it will be the exact same effect as Barbed Undertow against a lot of big decks like Leviathan, Guardian, things like that.
I think
And Barbed Undertow is not played in the deck most of the time.
I think an additional issue here is just that Azalea is actually really easy to beat. You just got to shove enough D-reacts in there and have enough things to actually try and fatigue. The issue is because
that's not
of
what people want to do.
no, you can't. You just lose a bunch of other matchups by doing that because it requires so many cards in order to do that. If you want to play like if the funny thing is I don't think it's possible that Azalea could get to a level where it was 20-something% of the meta. It's too easy to beat with like a fatigue deck. Like and then you just like pure out fatigue it, and you're just like, I'm putting all my armor in, I'm putting all the D-reacts in. Like, yes, you can still lose, but you're gonna win that a lot of the time. I know I did it at a calling when I played Bravo, but I'm just saying that. So you'll never see it get to that percentage. So now it's in a weird spot where it's like, what if you just run into this as the aggro deck, you just like take an auto loss. If you run it like it's just like another deck that because there is no counter play for it as any aggro deck, you're at the mercy of whatever happens. That you're just gym lucking that you don't run into it. Because if it ever got big enough, it would get kiboshed by defensive decks. So it's in this like weird loophole where you're just hoping you never run into it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I hope I never run into it.
I hope I never run into it.
I don't know.
I'd love to run into
You're
it,
right though about
personally.
I mean, I don't know. The deck certainly is not played enough where it's going to be hard countered, basically. Like, I don't know. But we really haven't like. So, like for example, like when Starvo was like super big, like every deck was shoving unmovable in their deck. Everybody was shoving unmovable in their deck, right? But like that's because Starvo was like so strong. So are you saying that like that needs to happen? Like people need to just be putting unmovable in their deck so they can beat Azalea? Or like...
No, there's no solution.
That's not every deck can support that.
I'm just saying there isn't a solution to the problem, which is you better just not run into Azalea in Swiss. Just don't do it. Like that's that is to recontextualize the conversation. That is my Azalea problem. It is a deck that you just have to not run into in order to top an event.
Yeah. And I've been spending this whole time trying to figure out like an aggro plan, and every single plan I've come up with involves the word hope, which is not where you want to be.
I do hope that after this next set, there are more decks that can combat her, so it's not very much of an issue.
Wager seems good.
It's more of a risk to running it. But I think the deck is absolutely
Wager
busted,
Clash.
as of its position right now, and people should be playing Azalea. I think it is very, very, very strong. It's way pushed that like no one is talking about, is my opinion.
Yeah.
It just does things
glad
that
we
it shouldn't
talked
be
about
allowed to do. Yeah, but it just can't ever be the most popular deck because it has an inherent weakness. But I think people will be surprised. I think the new age of playing Azalea is it plays its own D reacts. It also sometimes plays Sigil now as well, giving it more room to find its big arrows. Also giving it the ability to play off smaller hands, because it is significantly better at playing off smaller hands now than it was previously. And if people put more reps into that, they will find that an Azalea with a 2-card or a 3-card hand is like just as scary as a 5-card hand, because its
Super
efficiency is ridiculous and its on hits are just way above rate. Cool. Anything else on my
Yeah, I think Death
on
Dealer is a
Your
dumb weapon.
rant? No, I think
Tunic
that
Death
it's
Dealer
totally
draw a
right.
card is too good.
Tunic Death Dealer draw card is also very strong, but that is
Death
always
Dealer in
been a
general.
thing.
Every time it's activated, I'm like, this card is so broken. Like, how is this a thing?
And it's weird because I agree that it doesn't from the onset feel like it should be broken, because it's like, oh, it can only use its boots once. Oh, it can only use its gloves once. But that's like enough. If you like spend enough time playing the Azalea, you realize that there's just like only a couple of rounds where like things have gone wrong and you need to be able to, throw something out there to mess with your opponent. And like, oh look, I have tools to do that. They're just over here on the side. I guess I'll finally use my armor that I have.
Starts in play, sits in play.
Yes.
Yeah, the addition
but if I
of Endless
was
Arrow to the deck is
playing Bravo, I'd play D reacts. Big D reacts. I would play Staunches in my Bravo, because you should play it for the mirror as well. But that's a whole other argument.
That's cowardly Bravo player over here.
No. Okay, cool. Let's jump over, unless anyone has anything else in the Azalea train. I just think it needs to be watched, because it can be a problem moving forward. So we have some Discord questions, a couple Discord questions. This is a follow-up question from a Sketchy Man and White Band, from the last week's topic, which was food routines at events. And it's asking, how do we actually get the healthy food or get the food in general when we're traveling for tournaments? Are we making grocery trips? Are we using DoorDash? Or are we bringing it with us? So how do you organize actually having, everything you need for a major when you're flying out to another event?
I have a spreadsheet.
The best way to do it.
Anything.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay.
Lucas can be quiet for a little bit.
I have a spreadsheet and a list of optimally all the food that I will have available for the week, mostly for what I'll be eating before the tournament and then between rounds. After the tournament, I'll attempt to eat with the team and get whatever fits whatever my diet plan is, if I can. But yeah, basically, if I can bring some of those things with me, I do that. Things like protein bars, that kind of thing. Nuts, I'll fly with those in my bag. Things like, I don't know, salad, blueberries, eggs. However I have to get it, I'll figure it out. Worst case, you should always be able to get it delivered to you by paying a little bit of a premium. Uber Eats, Instacart, whatever. It should be doable. Or if you can somehow walk or Uber to a grocery store, if you prefer that, you can do it that way.
So I wasn't on
the best way
last
to do
one
it.
where we actually answered the question, but I just don't eat most of the
neither,
time at most events. Like, yeah, like I will usually just, I mean, unless somebody like Dan or Charles hands me something, I will typically have not eaten anything for the entire event and just force myself to get through it. I've actually find that sometimes that eating can actually like bog me down and like cause me to fatigue more. So I will be very careful about eating during a tournament. It doesn't always happen, but it has. I have had it happen in the past, where I regretted like eating in the middle of the tournament. So that's not the best answer for this person who's trying to answer it, but I don't think I'm very well equipped to answer this question. So
yeah, it's okay. I
think
also don't
ultimately
eat during the event, but I like to make sure that I have drinks and whatnot for the morning or around the event. And that's typically just like if we're having a team house or something, we just make an order. What do you want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's what we're having for breakfast. Who wants this stuff? Who wants coffee? Who wants etc. And then we just order it. and sit there. But I'm in the same boat. I don't. If I eat during an event, then I get tired. I don't. It's always been that way. No matter what I'm eating, I
Yeah.
just eat something and it's like, I sleep now.
Yeah, I think everyone has like different requirements. I've talked to a lot of people who always eat, a lot of people who never eat, but figure out what is best for you. And then if you do eat, like whatever you're gonna plan end up doing, you should do it like you should figure it out before the event. Like going the whole 9 yards and doing Dan's like spreadsheet thing is a lot for some people, but like I know my plan is always like when I get there, like if I get in early enough, I go to a grocery store because it's typically cheaper, and you can like walk around and choose like what all you want for the weekend. I will say I think I've had a DoorDash order the last like 6 or 7 events I've gone to, because that never works out. Part of that is like Brody's fault, and part of that is my dad's fault. But I mean, like figure out what's best for you. If that is eating, like just make sure you have a plan. You know, if you're like my personal thing is I sometimes like to eat. Like I don't eat every time I go to an event, but I always have like multiple granola bars in my bag. Usually, if I'm gonna go to a top cut, I need to eat in between. Like I can usually get through 7 rounds, and I have enough energy, and I don't want to eat because it will bog me down. But then after that, like I need food. Like at the Battle Hard in Barcelona, Charles's sister actually brought me a sandwich, and that like won me the Battle Hardened on the spot. Like it was over once I had that sandwich. Like I've had a few ham sandwiches like before, during, and on stream in some situations in top cut scenarios, and it saves me. But like whatever you need, like if you think you're somebody who might want to eat at some point, just make sure you have some food. Like if that's a granola bar, if that's a sandwich, water, like whatever you need, make sure you have it ahead of time, because being the guy that's like scrambling to find food for your 20-minute break between round 6 and 7 is just not a good situation to be in.
Cool. Okay, the next question here from Fighting Walloon is: in some games, going second is a huge advantage. For instance, Agromir's. If you lose the die roll in those situations, are there things you can do in sideboarding or your game plan to improve your win percentage? I would say this is pretty specific, depending on what the actual deck is, if you can do something or not. But
Mhm.
in general, I think there are a lot of things that you can do. But Pat, if you want to start us off with some ideas on what you try and do when you get the opposite of what you want to start with.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really intrigued me about Flesh and Blood is like the dice roll and like going first versus going second, because like I remember like literally my first event, and like the conversation was being had everywhere. Everybody's question: do you go first? Do you go second? And just one of the best things about Flesh and Blood that that's not a problem in this game, in my opinion. Like I don't think the dice roll of who goes first is a problem in this game. Um, that being said, when you're talking about aggro mirrors and like when it is like there is an advantage to be gained, like, and there certainly will be a correct answer almost every time. It's just whether or not have already figured this out ahead of time. Um, but once you actually get there, like you can have like different equipment, and pick a different equipment. So like I know that whenever we're doing dromai testing, like a lot of times based on whether we're going first or second, we would present a different headpiece into certain matchups, um, uh, things like that, which is a relatively easy thing that you can do that doesn't take much out of your actual sideboarding slots. um, I'll say that that's one that's pretty frequent for me. But like in certain spots, like you might bring in more D reacts. I tend to like have like a little bit more. Um, my tendency is to want to keep a clean list of whether going first or second, where I'm sideboarding the same most times. But it is something that we talk about when preparing for events and things like that. But I would say that in my opinion, that like any advantage that your opponent gains from going second can be overcome in a lot of positions just because of the way the game's designed.
Dan,
Yep.
thoughts?
I actually have a few examples of where I have
Uh,
changed.
Short answer, I would say yes. There's plenty of things you can do if you lose the die roll to compensate. Yeah, like Cody said, it's like very contextual based on the deck you're playing, the deck they're playing. I think, like Pat said, equipment's the most common case. Especially think about like against wizards, right? If you're going first, maybe you don't pack as much arcane barrier. If you're going second, maybe you do, so they can't just get 4 free chip damage on the first turn, right? Stuff like that. Yeah, it's hard to answer just because there's so many. It's so dependent on the situation, but there's certainly cards you could add to the deck too, like D-Reacts, or I think of things like when Fi was very popular. One way to kind of compensate for going first in that matchup was to play like Breaking Point, because ideally you're just getting that arsenal, and then you're kind of mitigating the first card they set, ideally, to try and get back advantage. If they happen to high roll into Breaking Point in the first 4 cards, you're kind of screwed, but it is what it is.
Okay, Lucas, you can talk now.
Okay. So there are a few examples that I have of where I have changed my sideboarding. Usually it's you play a few games and then you figure out like the texture of the game, and this is most prevalent in aggro mirrors, but you figure out how many turns it goes and usually like how many times you arsenal. There are a lot of examples. So for example, when I go first and I'm playing Bravo, a lot of the times I like to play 1 Pulverize so that if I draw Showtime or Imposing Visage, I can heave a Pulverize on turn 0. Whereas if I go second, it's pretty unlikely that I'm ever going to make that play, and Pulverize is much weaker and I won't play it. Or if I'm playing Levia, I might play Gambler's Gloves when I'm going second because I can't block as much and mitigate the risk of Scab Skins. Or if I'm playing like a Fimir, I used to play Command and Conquer, but only when I would go second. You can debate whether or not that's correct, but I would play it going second because a lot of the times in the Fimir, I would find that neither player would arsenal for most of the game except on turn 0. And so if I was going second, Command and Conquer was pretty much always going to be live at some point in the game, whereas if I went first, a lot of the time, especially if they didn't draw Art of War, they would just never arsenal a card, so it would be dead. And then, like you said, the Draw My thing, and there's some with Prism and all these different things. But I think ultimately it's about game texture and how many turns it's going to be and where you find certain cards being good. And sometimes you want them because they're good going first. Sometimes you want them because they're good going second. But I think that you should always be cognizant of first versus second when you're sideboarding, especially with a couple cards in different decks in certain matchups, because it really does really change how effective certain cards can be. Who goes first?
Yeah, I'll give you some generic advice for mirrors. For aggro mirrors, when you are getting stuck going first, you want to bring in defense cards. Because of the way the game works, the secondary player who's going second gets to press damage first. And typically in an aggro race, whoever forces your opponent to block first ends up winning the game. So the health total for going second or disrupt is usually enough that you get like half a turn ahead of the person who's going first, which is why you typically want to go second as an aggro deck. Because of that, if you're stuck going first, that's when you take a couple of D-Reacts and throw them in your deck, because you need a catch-up mechanic in your deck to allow yourself to be able to block so that your health doesn't drop too fast so that you can turn around the pressure. Also, if you're in the mirror, if there's a way for you to get some, typically the number's like 3 damage on round 1. It actually neutralizes to go second in a lot of cases. In a lot of matchups, the sweet spot's like 3 damage. If you can stick 3 damage on round 1 while getting a set card, you still have to have your set card, which is important, which is kind of hard to do. That typically neutralizes going second in most matchups. So that is, generic assistance if you have to go first in an aggro match. Other than that, you're just hoping that you draw better than them, because aggro match mirrors, there's nothing else you could do other than I typically want to throw in a couple of D-Reacts and try and get some damage on round 1 if possible.
And sometimes it's better to go first in aggro mirrors because you scale based on number of cards usually. So if your first hand is just like nuts, like you might just bury them.
You're also the first person to have a 5-card hand as well.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it just has to be higher than whatever unblocked damage they put in on their first turn by a significant margin in order to catch up to not be the first person to have to start blocking.
Yep.
That's kind
I just want to reiterate what Lucas said at the end really quick. Just make sure when you're sideboarding, after you find out if you're first or second, just think about if there's any impact to your sideboarding decisions. I feel like a lot of people don't, and they kind of assume they're like, no, my plan just stays anyway. Just make sure you take that second to like
Some
think
people
about it. Like
don't
now that
even-
you know you're first or second, like does anything actually change?
Yeah. Some people don't even like know, or they'll just like roll after sideboarding. Like I've met some people who don't even realize
don't do
that
that.
you're supposed to roll before. Like there are some people who I've met they'll
Yeah,
like
which is
finish
fair.
sideboarding, and then they're like roll, and I'm like I just got my deck box out. Like of course we're gonna roll, but I haven't sideboarded yet. Like or I'm about to sideboard now.
I don't know. I played a lot of decks that it was like significant that if I went first or second, the deck was different, like Viscerai. Like back in the day, if you played Viscerai, you had to roll to know if you were putting Read the Runes in the deck or not. You'd be like,
Yep.
oh, if I go first, Read the Runes goes in the deck. Oh, go on second, take the Read the Runes out of the deck. So, if playing a couple of those, you get in that habit. But it is, I think, a spot that you can try and gain some deck building skill in that is underutilized currently in the game is first and second different boarding. I think it is, especially on a local level, battle hardened level. Those levels, I think you can get edges by having game plans that are that minute and that that finicky. So, okay, last question we got for the podcast today is also from Fighting Walloon, which is, if you look at the heroes that are revealed in H so far, which one seems the most powerful, and which one are you most interested in testing? So out of all the heroes we have revealed, if you're looking at just the hero, because we don't really have any good cards for them yet, what do you think? I'm playing Kasai.
Betsy.
That's it. Kasai.
Betsy.
All Kasai.
I'm excited for Betsy. I'm excited for Betsy. I realize Kasai is probably more interesting a hero, but she seemed like I love her ability in the late game. Like she seems to me like a second cycle deck that like really rewards you for like even if she doesn't have a weapon that's comparable to Anathos, like just being able to have like a 3-card 10 overpower like is like in the late game, that's going to be huge. Like if you can survive long enough to like do that like on back-to-back turns and just like force the end of the game in that way, it really excites me. I'm really excited to put her on the table and see the rest of her card pool. Now, is it worth losing cards like Crippling Crush? I don't know, but like the fatigue player in me thinks that there's something there. So I'd love to see how she goes a little bit further. But she's not flashy for sure.
No, I think that's a good pick though, for sure. Dan,
I think everyone but Mr. Gold looks pretty strong.
Well, I think
Is it
Mr. Olympia is
like clearly he needs a little support maybe.
Cards. Yeah, we don't know what all's there.
Maybe he is strong. I don't know, but based on just hero abilities, like I'm looking at the other three, yeah, and they all seem pretty strong. Like Brute being consistent is kind of spooky. I agree with what you said about Betsy, and then making your weapon attacks is free is kind of nuts. And you also can make gold, or no? Does she have a gold ability?
Kasai?
Yeah, she makes gold off her hero ability.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
She
so
makes
just
lots
Mr.
of
Gold
gold.
with free weapon swings. That sounds great.
What about you, Lucas? What are you most excited about?
I am excited for whichever Guardian ends up being more boring. Ideally, not a fatigue deck. Like whichever of the two Guardians that is. Like if that ends up being Bravo, and he's just like same old boring, like you go dominate a crippling crush and just like all that. Like I love that stuff. Like boring flesh and blood, whatever the most boring thing is. Like KO's going to be cool to build. I'm sure Kasai will be some like cool deck that does these really good things, and maybe I think Olympia is actually pretty strong. I think he's like gone under the radar so far. Obviously, we have literally no cards or evidence to back that up. But making a gold every turn seems really strong, and it seems like he can make one or maybe even more every turn. No, you can only make one a turn, but there's other stuff that can make gold. I think his synergy with generic
because of the way his ability is worded.
Yeah, it only triggers once a turn. No, it triggers whenever you win. Oh, yeah,
it triggers once per turn, but it's on every attack. It's threatening. So like if you don't hit on your first attack,
it's once per
you wager
attack.
and you wager a second time. Yes, so
I'm pretty sure
it can trigger if you block the first wager out and then you wager again in the same turn.
Yeah.
That you also make a gold on the second attack, which is really strong.
If
there's enough to do with the gold in that hero.
Yeah, his specialization is also really interesting, especially with there's a card that we got spoiled for a while ago that's you can pay a gold instead of playing its cost, and then your next attack that wagers this turn gets +3 and overpower, I believe, and then whenever you would make a token this turn, you double that amount of tokens. Yeah, that card with the specialization seems like insane. Like you give it overpower, and then you just make like 6 tokens. Like that's really really strong. Um, and then his ability to use generics is also interesting. Obviously, people have talked about the whole thing where you go like pitch a blue, money where your mouth is, command and conquer, and then you have the 0 for 3 attack react in hand where it's like you have this 4 cards and you get 12 damage, you make 2 golds, and you kill their arsenal. Like that's like a little silly. But yeah, I mean, I want the boring guardians. That's all I actually care about. If Betsy's more boring, then I'm sure I'll love Betsy.
No, I think I'm definitely Kasai. If you've been on the Twitter at all for Fab, you've seen a lot of people popping off about Kasai being fun to play currently. I can agree. Everyone wants Crown of Seeds, and we have Crown of Seeds at home. It's called Dynamo, and it is great. Speaking of which, we gotta go. I'm gonna go play some Kasai. That's where we gotta go. Goodbye, guys.
We're getting rid of the envelope
7
here, but
envelope
What we could do
and
here is go ahead
darkness.
and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of envelope and darkness.